Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's National Arts Club at Home program. My name is Laura Daly, and I, along with Charles Snyder, are co-chairs of the Roundtable Committee. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Arts Club, we are a 501c3 nonprofit based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. Annually, the club offers more than 150 free programs to the public, including exhibitions, theatrical and musical performances, lectures, and readings. For more information about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. This event will be recorded and posted within 24 hours on the NAC's YouTube channel for you to share with your friends. If you are interested in becoming a member of the National Arts Club, you can contact us at admissions@thenationalartsclub.org for more information. Our event tonight, Why Waste Food, addresses the fact that 30% of all food grown for human consumption is lost, discarded every year, while the population suffering from food shortages grows. Andrew F. Smith, who is the author of Why Waste Food, will examine the causes of avoidable food waste and highlights ways that we can tackle this global concern. Mr. Smith has taught food study courses at the New School since 1996. He serves as a series editor for the Edible series and the Food Controversies series at Reaction Books in the United Kingdom. Mr. Smith has written more than 500 articles in academic journals, popular magazines, and newspapers, and has served as historical consultant to several television series. He has delivered more than 1,500 presentations on various educational, historical, culinary, and international topics. Andrew's book, Why Waste Food, can be purchased from the NAC's preferred independent bookseller, Books on Call NYC, via the link that we will be sharing in the chat box. Following this presentation, there will be a Q&A, so please feel free to use the chat function for any questions that you may have. And now, please welcome Andrew Smith, whose camera is not working.
Oh,
but listen to him because it's a great, it's just great information that he has to impart. So Andrew, take it away.
thank you very much. And I humbly apologize for my non-operating camera. First, I would like to say, what is food waste? It is a whole series of different things, and it has different definitions by different people. So I just want to give you the broad outlines. Number one, 30 to 40% of the food that is grown for human consumption in the world is either lost or wasted before it is eaten. So consequently, that means that a large number of people who would otherwise could be fed, in fact, are not. So in the United States, if only a small portion, 20 or 25% of the food that is wasted, in fact, can be transported or in fact distributed to people in need, there would be no malnutrition in America. Likewise, in the world, if only 20% of the food that is wasted in the world could be used to feed people, you would have no hunger and you would have no malnutrition, provided that you've got a system of distribution. In addition to the water, in addition to the food that is wasted, you have 21% of all fresh water, you have 19% of all fertilizer, you have 18% of all cropland. These figures do not include a whole series of other wasted issues. So for instance, seafood, 40% of seafood that is caught by fishermen is thrown overboard as bycatch. Nor does this include the waste associated with animal feed, nor does it associated with the waste connected with ethanol. So we have a lot of waste. Now, the really good news is There is absolutely no one who supports food waste. Nobody argues for it. So consequently, all I can do is say everybody's in favor of ending waste. And we will be talking about some of the ways of doing so as we move along. So why is food waste a problem today and not in the past? Now, I understand that many of you may live in Greenwich Village or in the area. I want you to know they had a really great solution for food waste in the 19th century. If you had a home, you just go out your backyard, you buried it and used it for compost. If you were in an apartment, no problem. You just opened up the window and threw out your waste. Why would this be a success? Because you had pigs in the street that would eat the waste up. Until the late 19th century, New York City had pigs all over the streets that would eat and consume any waste that would be thrown out. Now, unfortunately, the city decided they didn't want pigs running around anymore, and so they declared it illegal. And as last I checked, it's still illegal to have a pig in New York City, although I understand that many people, in fact, do. Now, secondly, New York, once they stopped giving the food waste to pigs, they decided here's another solution. We'll put it on a boat, go out 100 miles into the Atlantic and dump it into the ocean. That's a great solution, except environmentalists started to complain bitterly about that, and they decided the better thing to do is to put it into landfill. As far as I know, the landfill that New York City uses now is in North Carolina, someplace in the South. So the food waste and all the other waste that is produced goes into trucks. The trucks pick them up, then they transport them to landfill and dump them into landfill. Now, the problem with dumping food waste and other organic matter into landfill is that it produces greenhouse gases. In fact, 8% of the greenhouse gases produced in the world is caused by people throwing food out and ending up into the landfill and therefore causing methane production, and the methane creates a greenhouse gas. So there's very serious problems with food waste. Now, why is food waste a problem today? And there are many reasons for this, but the number one is the low price of food. Now, every time I say this, everybody objects and say the cost of food is going up, blah, blah, blah. All I can do is say in 1900, 44% of the take home income of most American families in cities, in fact, went to buying food. Today, that is about 6.8% of income for people living in cities, families living in cities, that goes in for the actual cost of buying food. Now, you can complain, as we will, and under other circumstances I would, about the industrial food system, but one of the things that it has produced massive amounts of low-cost food. So, we've got a problem today, and food waste has dramatically increased. It is part of every different segment of the food system. For instance, the farmers produce a lot of food. Much of it they can't sell it because it is ugly. For produce, for instance, they can't sell it for other reasons. Trucks break down, storage areas break down, they can't get the agricultural laborers that they need. A pandemic hits and they can't figure out how to get the food from the farm into the city. And so a large amount of food is wasted on farms. It is also a massive amount of waste that is produced by food manufacturers. And so some of it is caused by breakdown in equipment. Other parts of it, they don't want a lot of the parts that they use the food to produce. So, for instance, breweries throw out like 80 to 90% of the grains that they in fact take in. They toss out. Now, some of them give it to animals, and some of them have other projects set up now, which are trying to solve that problem. But there is a whole series of problems on food manufacturing. Likewise, there's a very serious problem with supermarkets. You may love a supermarket. If you walk into it, you walk into the produce section, you will quickly see that there's a number of almost perfect uh, uh, tomatoes. There's perfectly sized potatoes. There's perfectly sized whatever the product is. That is what the retail grocery store will in fact want to sell. And that is what you will buy. If you see something that's bruised, you won't buy it. If you see it's ugly, you won't buy it. All sorts of reasons on why consumers won't buy a lot of the fruits and vegetables, but that's a massive amount of waste. So that's an issue with supermarkets. There's a second issue that's connected with production, and that has to do with expiration dates. Now, this is a complicated topic. There's at least 50 or 60 different expiration date systems operating today, and it's difficult to understand it. Many of those expiration dates are set by manufacturers. They don't necessarily have any reason on why the food has to be consumed by a particular time. In other words, some of the times they don't have any evidence that says the food won't be good if it's kept after that period of time. So most of us will take one look at the expiration date, and if it's close to better if eaten by, we toss it out. So that's a problem with food manufacturers and with those of us who are consumers. We don't want to eat food that isn't safe, and buy if it's if you start looking at the cookbooks in the 1950s, safety is a major concern. It should be a major concern today, but the problem is that most of us don't want to eat, potentially don't want to eat or drink food and drinks and beverages that in fact could give us illness or cause other problems for us. So we tend to throw things out. And that's a problem that began particularly in the 1950s, when most cookbooks would come along and say, if it's discolored, toss it out. If it smells slightly off, you throw it out. Most of the things can be saved. And so at least there's re-examination on that. Likewise, restaurants. Restaurants have two major areas of food waste. One is front of the house. It is something like 30 to 40% of the food that customers order in restaurants is not consumed. The restaurant has no choice but to throw the food out. They can't do anything else with the food that they're given to customers. But there's a second part to food waste that occurs in restaurants, and that's behind in the back of the house, and that is where they order the wrong amount of food. They don't order what is needed for a particular product, and so they have to throw things out. And so there's a large number of food waste that is associated with restaurants and other food services. But by far the largest number of problems related to food waste are in fact consumers, and that's us. The best estimate is 44% of the food waste is us. So it's us making decisions that we don't want to eat certain foods at, or want to eat a portion of the food at restaurants. It's us saying, well, this expiration date says it's not as good as it would have been if I had eaten it before this. It's us leaving food inside the refrigerator in the back, all the things that are caused down there, but it is a huge percentage of the food waste is in fact directly caused by consumers. Now, there's up on your screen, there's a food recovery hierarchy. And what this tries to do is say, what is the best solutions that we can come up with? And the top solution is reduce production. This is an issue nobody wants to talk about, but there is no reason on why the world produces the amount of food that it does. Now, the problem is, even if you could figure out a way to distribute the food to the people who need it, not just those of us who can afford it, you would still have 20 to 30% of the food waste still wasted. So there's no reason for us producing the amount of food that there is. Just for your information, everyone projects population is going to increase dramatically up during the next 50 years, and it's going to be such and such. The population figures that are at least slated for 2050 and beyond that, there's no problem in terms of food production. There is a problem in terms of food distribution, and that's a major issue that has to be dealt with. So number one, reduce production. Nobody wants to talk about that. Another solution that has been fantastic in terms of things that people have been doing in the last 30 years is feed people. Large amounts of food now from supermarkets that would typically have been tossed out. This is good food, not food that's rotten, not food that has any serious problems with it, are now given to food banks and other operations that are distributing food to people who need it. This is particularly an issue and a problem during the pandemic, and there's lots of people, increasingly numbers of people who need food, and many supermarkets now have found solutions by distributing the good food to supermarkets. Likewise, farmers have now come up with a whole number of different solutions to make sure that food can go from the farm. This is food that can't sell, produce that they can't sell, for instance, to food banks and to other places that will help feed people. So for instance, they have gleaning operations. Gleaning is an activity that's actually gone back hundreds of years. And it's when the farmer finishes the harvesting their crop, they allowed people in neighborhoods and people in towns to come by and pick whatever was left over. And so that's been a process that's been underway for hundreds of years. In the last 20 years, a large number of gleaning operations. So farmers, when they can no longer sell their crops for whatever reason, they will invite food banks to come out. And then many of the food banks have a system whereby they will pick the food that's members of the food bank will go out and pick the food. They will end up with some food for themselves. They will give a large amount of the food to the food banks. And in some cases, the farmers will make a deal where they get a portion of the food too. So it's working out particularly well. The third from the top is to feed animals. There are lots
Andrew,
of, yes.
Andrew, before you continue, there's a lot of background noise, so it's hard for us to hear you.
Okay, hold on one second. You have to shut up.
That's not what I meant.
Hopefully that's better.
You tell them.
I did.
I heard. Okay.
Sorry about that. All right. Where was I? All right, feeding animals, that's one thing. Now, one of the new things is energy production, and that's ethanol in large part, but there's no reason on why food waste cannot be converted into energy. In a number of different states and different communities, they're taking organic matter, including food waste, but not limited to that, and they are taking it in and producing ethanol, which are then used in the trucks that actually go out and pick up the food in the first place. So at least there's ethanol production. There's different people with different views on whether ethanol production is good, and that's another topic for another day. The final good area is simply composting. New York City, when I was in New York City, prior to the time of the pandemic, I would have dropped off all of the one small bag of food waste that I would have for family. You just go to the local market and drop it off there. In any case, I understand that that's stopped and that there's real concerns in New York City now about composting and some of the composting things. At least that's what I followed in the news, but maybe some of you know better. The worst thing you can do is throw it into landfill. But 38% of what Americans put into landfill is food waste or other organic matter. So that is a very serious issue. So there are literally thousands of projects that are underway around the United States and around the world that are helping to solve these problems. And that to me is one of the more exciting things that I found in working on this. There obviously is, if you've got good food that's edible, you can begin to distribute to other people. Now, it just recently, meaning the last 5 or 6 years, there has been community refrigerators. I don't know if they're available now in Greenwich Village or the area around the National Arts Club, but I know that other parts of New York City now have community refrigerators in which you can put good food that is covered, not necessarily a slice of ham or something like that, into a refrigerator, and people who need it can go out and pick what they want and take it from there. A number of restaurants in New York City are also doing that. As long as you believe that the food is good and that there's nothing wrong with it, then there's nothing illegal about putting food into refrigerators for other people. Whoever need it can do it. So that's one of the things. There's upcycling now, which is underway, which is interesting, and it may or may not be financially viable in the long run, but it's really exciting now. So, for instance, you have a brewery, all of the 80 to 90% of the spent grains, you can convert it into bread. And there are places in New York City and most other cities now that are actually taking spent grains from the small breweries in particular and making bread out of them. And they have to add a couple of ingredients to make it work, but at least that's a solution, potential solution for the long run. Upcycling also now means that much of the waste that comes out of manufacturing food that is not used in the food is removed from it can be used to produce other goods. So the goal is to say it's not just the food, the edible parts of the food, but it is also the non parts that you wouldn't typically eat that can be produced, that can be used to produce other items, not necessarily those that are food. Most of us waste food that I guess we don't really know it. My grandmother, every time I would eat an orange, my grandmother would take the peels that I would take off and make marmalade. Marmalade wasn't my most favorite food, but I always was impressed with the fact that she tried to save absolutely everything and prevent anything from going into compost. Likewise, how many of you have peeled a banana? Banana skins are edible. There's large numbers of people that will take the banana skins and all you can do is just put them in some batter, fry them up, and they taste pretty good. So there are all sorts of things that you can do with food that we typically waste that they're not necessarily have to be tossed out. They are edible. There are also a whole series of high-tech solutions that are underway. One of them is for working with retailers, for instance. How do you know how much food items that you're really going to need? If you buy too much and you can't sell it, then you got to throw out food. So there are now systems that are set up that can go into a retail operation. They can tell you exactly how much you're going to sell and how much you need to buy and when you need to buy it. And those systems are now in place in large numbers of at least large restaurants. So they've got systems there that are doing pretty good. The legal solutions that are there, one, it is not against the law to give food away as long as you believe the food to be good and you have reasons to believe that it's good. So at least you're legally protected for doing that. Other high-tech solutions, speaking about bananas, all of the banana leaves and the stalk are typically thrown out once you clip the bananas off the banana tree, then the bush dies. So you can save that and you can convert that. So now they're converting that into high fashion. So a number of fashion operations now will take items that would typically have been tossed out and will convert them into items that you can use for other purposes, not necessarily edible, but at least you can use them for other things and they will not end up as landfill. I can talk for hours and I would be delighted to do so. I would be more than willing to open it up to questions. And I just want to mention one other thing. I have a 1,100 page bibliography, which if you email me, it has organizations in it. It has apps, a whole series of apps, by the way. If you want to buy good food from restaurants late at night, many restaurants now have participated apps where you can go on, you can buy food at 30 or 40 or 50% off. You'd have to get it, but you have to go in and pick it up. Again, I don't know in New York what the pandemic has, as whether that is still as true as it was a year ago. But that's another solution that is underway. So there's lots of things that you can do that will make a difference. I'm sorry, this is not my best organized event that I've ever put on. I apologize for me not being there and for the noise in the background, but I'd be open to questions and I would love to get any questions that you may have.
Okay, so Andrew, we do have some.
Good.
Uh, And one is if you could talk about vertical farming, its feasibility and projections.
Yeah, there's a big question on vertical farming. I can't. Uh, I've read the articles on it. It's obviously a great experiment, and it should be experimented more. What many people are stating is the obvious, that vertical farming requires much less waste from the environment, and at least in theory, vertical farming will produce food when you need it and when it is can be sold. So there's all sorts. So you don't have to just grow food during the time in which the season is the best for it to grow. You can grow it 12 months a year if you want to. So there's lots of reasons for that. I think the experiments are good. I have some friends that have a vertical farm across the river in New Jersey, and they're making a profit. They're doing particularly well. So I think it's good. Is that the long-term solution? I don't know. But it's worthwhile trying, and I'm delighted with the experiments that are underway.
Thank you. Another question is regarding the big box stores like Costco and Walmart. How have they added to the food waste problem? Or are they typically the ones who would have efficiency experts?
That's a very good question. 3 years ago, I would say they were a disaster area, that they were one of the parts that you could point the finger out and say shame, shame, shame. But in the last 3 years, they've done a lot of work to improve their ability to get good food out, the good food that they can't sell, or that they've made the determination that they will not be able to sell before it, for produce, for instance, that will
Mhm.
turn bad, or good food before expiration dates will run up. The idea is that they want to get that food out and get it to food banks. So there have been really good efforts to try to do that. Now that said, you can go online and see all the dumpster diving. I don't know if anybody's into dumpster diving. Some
I
of my
guess
students have been into this.
yeah.
So all I can do is say, historically, there would, grocery stores would just dump the stuff in the back, and there was videotapes of people going into the dumpsters, taking out good food, then making the food, and then serving it to people. And so there are organizations that do that in New York City. And in fact, at least again, prior to the pandemic, once a week they would take people out. So if you wanted to go dumpster diving, you could go with a group, and they at least would give you safety figures, and they would prepare the food, which at least you could or didn't have to eat if you didn't want to, but at least the food was available. And that's still going on. So there's still a lot of food waste in the retail sector, but the large companies like Walmart and like Costco, for instance,
Right.
they have the efficiency to pull it off. They are doing the best that they possibly can. They get good credit when they give it away. They get a stock. They get a tax break. So it's in their self-interest to be able to distribute the food that they can't sell for whatever reason, or don't want to sell, and they can get it to people who need it, and that's good. Part of the problem there is food banks are stuck with whatever, all the massive amounts of food that is available at a particular time, and they may or may not have the ability to distribute it. So it's not the best system in the world, but a lot of the problems are being worked out, and I'm impressed with what large supermarket chains have been able to do.
Okay, before we go on to, because we have a few more questions and plenty of time within our hour limit to take care of them. If you could add your email address.
smithaf@newschool.edu. Again, smithaf@newschool.edu, and I would be delighted to send the bibliography. It is a work in progress, but it is the material that I've collected over the last 10 years of my interest in food waste.
Right. Okay, I'll see if I can, on my other computer, copy it and put it into the chat myself. Okay, so let's go on to the next question. Um, uh, how did you get involved in the food world? Was there a specific incident?
Oh, do you want the truth?
Yes,
I,
we
I
want the
have to. I I have to be
Food
honest with you.
advocacy.
I had a full-time profession that had virtually nothing to do with food for 43 years of my life. So that's the first message. The second message is I always wanted to write a book. I can't tell you why I wanted to write a book, but I saw a TV uh, a little usurp from a TV saying the first tomato in America was eaten on the steps of the courthouse in Salem, New Jersey in 1812. And I said, wow, that's an interesting story. Why weren't people eating tomatoes before that? And of course, the answer was they're poisonous. So I started doing exploration on that, and unconnected with my work, I just wrote 6 or 7 articles and got them published and said, wow, this is a great topic. So I spent 2 or 3 years doing research on tomatoes. My first book was a history of tomatoes, which I loved writing. And that was 32 books before. So I just got into writing, and I got into food. And to me, it's just fascinating. So it wasn't something that I ever set out to do, but it was something that I'm so delighted that I ended up there.
Great. Okay, next question is, what percent of the waste stream is represented by perfectly edible leftovers, and what can we do about reducing them?
That's a good question, and there's not a really good answer to it. But my suspicions are in terms of the food waste as opposed to organic waste. It's probably 50 to 60% of the food that is tossed out is edible, meaning that you can eat it, and maybe the other 40% is non-edible. But if people had taken steps beforehand before it became inedible, it could have been consumed. So most of us don't pay attention to what's in the back of the refrigerator. When we do, we see green mold on the top, and that's it. We toss it out. So we don't pay attention as my grandmother would have paid attention. She would know everything in that refrigerator. She would have an idea of what it had to be used by, and then she would do it. As far as I know, she never threw anything into the garbage can. She did have the advantage of having a compost pile. So she could put some food scraps into that. So the quick answer is even the non-edible food waste is usable, meaning that you can feed animals with it. You can make compost out of it. You can make energy out of it. And some of the energy production facilities now have it so that you can make energy out of it, and then the remains of that can be still composted. So that's one of the advantages. You can really build on things that don't have to go into landfill. Landfill is the worst possible thing that you could do with your food. That's it.
All right, our next question. Could you provide some methods on source reduction for farmers, schools, and individuals?
Well, the problem with farmers is they grow food in hopes that they're going to sell it, and they can sign contracts with, say, retailers, but the retailers have the ability to change the contract at the last minute. So you grow your food, or and then you wait for the contract to come through so you can sign it and get it, even though you have an agreement ahead of time that when the contract comes through, the retailer may say, well, we have too much of this, we don't want any more. So that's a problem with farmers, and is consistently an issue with them. They grow food. If you're not in a if you're on a farm, you've got to grow food when the weather is good. You can only grow it in certain ways, and by certain time it's no longer saleable. So farmers need to do the best that they can to increase that. So one of the things that they have begun to do is now there are artificial intelligence operations which will work with farmers, work with retailers, work with restaurants, that will make sure that at least the maximum efficiency within the system is possible. So they will say, all right, farmer, you need to do this and you need to ship it here. And so they will be able to be much more creative than what the old system was, which farmer sold it to a produce market then sold it to a retailer, and that's a problem. The second issue, of course, is with many of the foods that we eat are not produced in the United States, bananas being a good example. And so you have now containerization of banana operations, and you have artificial intelligence, which tells the producers how much bananas they're going to need, they're going to be able to sell. And so it's maximizing efficiency. And I think that's one of the real positive things that I suspect will certainly reduce waste in the system. That's not going to reduce consumer waste, and that's another problem. Did I miss part of the question? I'm sorry.
No, well, individuals.
Well,
What can I do?
None of us would waste food. Only all the other people out there do it. Number one, we have two big refrigerators. We shouldn't have big refrigerators. Now, one of the really exciting things is they've got smart refrigerators now. The smart refrigerator will actually take barcodes and will tell you exactly what's in your refrigerator. And they will also tell you what needs to be consumed quickly. And they will also give you recipes that you could use for that. So I don't have a smart refrigerator, but I've seen a couple. I'd like to buy one at some point in my life. They have smart kitchens now, which will do some of the same things. So it will tell you if you've got a product in your cabinet that you need to use. And so it will give you that information. There are a large number of websites now that all you need to do is go on it and say, I've got this amount of flour that I got to use it because it's turning brown on me, and they will give you recipes that you can use if you want to do it. So there's all sorts of new things that are out there, and I've tried to list everything that I know in my bibliography, but again, there's no day that goes by which I don't add material to it, and it is a work in progress. So all I can do is say that's what's really exciting to me on why I got into food waste 10 years ago and why I'm continue to be excited about it now. It just changes daily, and all sorts of new things are underway. And I really have confidence that things are going to improve.
Thank you. A few more questions. We still have plenty of time. These two, I think, are somewhat related, but they're coming from two different people. In any case, are there any regulatory approaches to limiting food waste?
Yes, other
And
countries.
akin to that is, what about tax breaks on corn?
Well, several things. There are now tax breaks for businesses and farmers that, in fact, can distribute food to food banks, for instance. That's an example of where they can get a tax break. So farmers and retail operations and restaurateurs can actually make money by giving food away that in the past they would have to pay somebody else to remove it. Now they can actually get somebody else to take it away from them, and they get a tax break on it. So that's one of the advantages of the system that they have. Other countries now have passed laws, and the laws in France, for instance, and Italy are severe. Retailers cannot distribute good, they must distribute good food. They cannot throw it away. And so their laws there are saying you can't do this. Likewise, a number of cities, like San Francisco, for instance, make it illegal for restaurants to throw food into the trash, meaning they can't throw it and ending up in landfill, which is a serious problem. New York City, the hope was that New York City would do that. And at least parts of the city had it was possible for you to put out your cans outside on special days, and they could put organic waste into them, and they would come and pick it up. In theory, that was supposed to be all of New York City, but I don't know how they would do that. Our apartment is 16 stories high. I'm not quite certain how they're going to be able to store food waste as a separate item and then put it out on the street. But that at least was the hope. So a number of cities have begun to require that. A number of countries are now requiring it. And so most European countries are far ahead of the United States. By the way, by far the number one success story is Korea. Korea now has less than 2% of food waste. And those who throw their food out, you have to go and take it to a place where they will weigh it, and they will charge you money for throwing out food waste. So Korea is a different country than the United States, but at least here's an example of a country that over the last 30 years have made substantial progress and minimizing almost to it's just a small amount of waste that's actually going into that. So a lot of legal issues that are underway in different communities in America. There are composting now systems that are set up in a number of different places. Again, I just read an article down here in St. Thomas about New York City composting. They said that there's problems with the two areas in New York City that have been used for composting. That was where you dropped off your food waste, and then it was taken to these areas to create a compost, and then the compost would go into community gardens or into parks and things like that, which is great. But I understand now that there were difficulties with the locations. Evidently, the people in the local area didn't like the aroma that was coming out of them. I'm not sure if that's the case. At least that's what the article said. So I hope New York doesn't take a step back. I
Mhm.
understand the pandemic is causing all sorts of problems that may not be there, but I hope in the future that there will be systems that are set up either requiring organic material collections and simply figuring out a better solution for them than tossing them into landfill and then having that landfill carted down to where, to North Carolina. Is that the place where they're dumping it now?
Could be. Um, Considering we have a new administration coming
Yeah.
in, um, are there organizations, there must be, that focus on food waste, who would be
Um,
able to enact, not for them to enact legislation, but would they start talking to the government in terms of regulations that can help this? Because a lot of this also fits
I know
with global warming and everything else. So, it's all kind of tied.
I know this will surprise everyone, but food waste is the one topic, political topic in the last 4 years that both Republicans and Democrats have agreed upon. And there's actually been a large, good progress that has been made. So I'm at least encouraged by the process that the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has taken in order to encourage projects. They've funded lots of different activities. They've got exploring different models. So it's the one area. Everybody loses by wasting food. Nobody wins. And so everybody wins when food isn't wasted. So you've got the system that's there that is a winner. So you may not use the statement saying, well, we'll save the environment if we stop food waste. But if you start saying you can make money by converting the food waste into energy, you can make money by distributing what would have been wasted to people who are in need. And again, there's no reason why people with businesses anyway cannot get tax breaks. So there's all sorts of good things within the system, and there's nobody who argues for food waste. So you don't have anybody saying, "Oh yeah, I'd like to waste a little more food," but everybody can get money. The best estimate is something like $1,000 per home in America is lost annually due to food that the good food that was good food that is then tossed out as food waste. So everybody can get money. Everybody can profit by this, and so that's the one area that I think there's lots of agreement, and I think there should be lots of progress made in the future with the new administration coming in.
Thanks. In terms of consumers wasting food, is this unique to Americans? Are we driving that trend, or are there other countries that waste food at our level?
Almost all developed countries have large amounts of consumer food waste. And Britain is also, for instance, 44% of the British consumers food for consumers is wasted by consumers directly or indirectly. And likewise, France and Italy have begun to pass laws making it illegal to throw out food. I mean, they have passed a number of rules and regulations which have decreased consumer food waste, but the consumer food waste has continued. So, and then as I pointed out, a country like Korea by far is the greatest example of a country that has reduced 98% of food waste. It's no longer waste So that's other countries are making good progress, like Japan, for instance. I think there are models out there that at least work in those countries, and they may work in ours. And I think we need to explore them. And internal to the United States, there's a huge educational efforts underway in elementary school and in secondary school and many colleges and universities. As far as I know, my food waste course was the first one in American college to deal with this, but most colleges and universities have programs for their students to prevent food waste on campus and to make sure that every student is fed. So particularly now during the pandemic, that's an issue. Universities are having problems, but at least there are educational projects that are underway. And a large number of nonprofit organizations have great education programs. And if you just go on YouTube, put food waste in, you'll come up with thousands of videos that will deal with different issues on food waste related topics. So there's a lot of material out there and there's a lot of interest. And there's nobody saying, oh yeah, we shouldn't waste the food.
Let's talk a little about expiration dates.
Yep.
I know that it's a constant uh, struggle with one of my sons when he comes to visit, because he's just itching to throw everything out of my refrigerator. And you know, I have a ketchup bottle in there that I've been using without harm for way longer than the expiration date. And
In
it's
your
only,
refrigerator, you have a ketchup bottle?
I do, yeah.
Shame, 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 shame.
Why?
Ketchup should. I wrote a whole book on ketchup, so all I can do is tell you,
Well,
you should
you know,
should
it's
never
I'll
don't
tell
put
you something.
ketchup.
That
Don't
and
put.
cereal and flour, there are certain things that, because of my early days living in a glorious New York City apartment, that was just, I had many roommates of the very four-legged, eight-legged, 12-legged kind. That stuff just, I'm just used to doing it. I know
Large.
I never put my tomatoes in the refrigerator ever.
Okay,
The
you
ketchup
make.
is
We'll work with you on the ketchup, so
good,
that's okay.
but
Now,
I keep eggs
all
much
I can.
longer. I keep eggs much longer than whatever the
All right.
expiration date is.
So let me come back to the initial question.
Yeah.
Expiration dates were established by food manufacturers. It is in their self-interest to have an early expiration date. So you'll throw out the product and then buy another one. So many cases, they had no rational reason for putting that expiration date on there. Now, the really good news is a large number of manufacturers have agreed, and over the next 2 years will implement a program in which there will only be two dates. One date best if used by, and the second date used before, meaning that there is a potential that if you don't use it before that date, that it could cause harm. We all want safe food. Nobody wants to eat food that's not safe. Many of the foods, there's no reason on why they can't last for years. So like spaghetti, for instance. I mean, you could take a look at many of the things, and they may even change color slightly, but that doesn't mean that they're not edible. Now, the really, really good news is now they've got smart labels, and at least I've seen some here, not a lot, but they're now smart labels that will go on packages of meat, for instance, and they will turn different colors when it will tell you that the information that the label is taking in is saying now this food is no longer any good. So at least you've got not the manufacturer saying it's bad, but you've got a label that comes along that will tell you whether the food is good to eat or not by the color that it is. And so there are a number of different products. And my suspicions are over the next 5 or 10 years, you're going to have virtually all products are going to have smart labels in them that will give you better advice than simply whether it's been in the refrigerator for a month or your son starts throwing out things. Talk to him about food waste. I've got a course at the new school that he can come in and take. How's that?
Sounds good to me. Are Let's see. Next question is, what types of food waste issues are your students at the new school interested in and working on?
Many of the students in my classes they have either worked in the hospitality industry or they've worked in restaurants. and they've seen the food that's being thrown out, and so they've got a concern, and they want to do everything that they can to deal with an issue that they see. Others are in fashion. You can make clothes out of food waste, and there's all of these top designers now are making clothes out of food waste, and they're bragging about, we made this out of old beans, and so there's all sorts of things that are going on, and it's a university-wide interest. So whether you're concerned with history, whether you're concerned with politics, whether you're concerned with fashion, whether you're concerned with food, whatever the topic is, there is an interest in it. So my classes have always been full. There's never been a class which I haven't on food waste that I haven't taught that hasn't had more people want to take it than I'm able to fit in a classroom. So that's exciting to me that the younger generation seem to be much more interested, like your son, for instance. So we just got to work with him on being more honest and better understanding of food waste issues.
Yeah, don't throw all my stuff out. Do you think the no-till movement will help?
The no-till
Till,
movement?
no-till.
Oh, no, we're not food waste. I don't. It would certainly help the environment. There's lots of good things that are connected with that. But do I think that will help food waste? And the answer is no.
No.
Now, that said, I mean, it's not just the food waste that's the problem in farming. It is the amount of fertilizer that's used. It's the amount of water that's used. It's the amount of pesticides that are used that are going to waste food. So, and if you have no-till agriculture, at least you can reduce some of those inputs. So it's at least an environmental plus no-till agriculture, but not necessarily one that will save more food. And the problem is distribution. How do you get the food that we produce to the people who need it? And food banks is one of those best solutions that the United States has been engaged working on for the last 30 years. But there's got to be a better distribution system in the United States, and there's got to be a better distribution system in the world. Therein lies the major issue that's before us. It's not amount of food. It's how do we get the food to people who need it. And so far we haven't come up with a perfect solution for that.
All right, so let me just see if there's anything else. So somebody is asking, where do you stand on garbage disposals?
That's an interesting question because for years it was illegal to have a garbage disposal in New York City. It's now you can have a garbage disposal in New York City, at least under certain circumstances. So I found that fascinating when I came to New York that you couldn't have a garbage disposal. In New York City now, what's interesting is the city will of the water system. What are all the organic waste, not just food waste, but human waste as well, goes into the sewer system, and now you have that goes into the plants in New York City, which will separate that, will convert the organic waste that goes into the wastewater system, convert it into energy. We'll use the energy to run the plant, and we'll then take the hard waste that's left over and convert it into compost, which will then be sent to farms. And so that's a fascinating solution, which I couldn't imagine that would be one of the more interesting solutions that are there. So there's appears to be no reason on why you can't use garbage disposals if the system is set up to be able to deal with the organic waste. That said, most of us throw out good food. We put them down the garbage disposal. My wife saves everything that's left over in a meal. Then she'll make a stew and she'll put whatever was left over into the stew. So there's thousands of things that you can do with even small amounts of leftovers. And so you just need to be thinking about that and have that as a priority. And unfortunately, most of us don't. You have so much time to eat. You slap stuff together, you eat it, and then you throw out stuff. It's easy to do. You don't think about the consequences of it. So all I can do is say lots of things you can do without having to throw out food. And many of the things that we throw out are perfectly edible,
Yeah.
and we just haven't ourselves convinced ourselves that we should be eating it.
My husband tells me the story all the time that his mother on Friday made what all of the kids called glop, which was a stew of everything left over for the week.
I like glop.
It got
I,
all thrown in, and it was like that was what they ate on Friday.
Man, you have to put spices in it. You put a little
Well,
spice
yes,
in it.
he added all
Yeah,
sorts of stuff and
yeah.
like mashed potatoes on top or whatever that but it was just, yeah, everything.
I eat food. I can't even see. I can't even remember where it came from. I mean, that's the proof that the food
Yeah.
that's being served is good. So
Yeah. Now I have, there's one last question.
yeah,
The latest technology, I keep reading about lab created protein and, you know, create, meatless varieties that, use other sources of protein. Um, is this something that's going to be scalable?
I
And
don't know. It's an interesting experiment, and I'm delighted that people are trying to do things like that. And what they're able to do, I mean, they frequently could take material that would typically be thrown out and convert it into products that are edible. And so it's a system that can use materials that would be typically wasted by food producers and convert it into that which might be edible. So that's one of the positive sides to it. Whether it has a long-term future or not, I don't know. But I think the experimentation is great. And again, that's one of the exciting things about the food world now. There are so many things that are going on, from vertical farming to no-till farming to all of the projects and experiments that are underway. It makes it really exciting, and it's very different than the world that I remember 30 or 40 years ago.
all right, so Andrew, thank you very much. This was all very informative and well done, even though we couldn't see you.
Humble apologies on my part.
Stuff happens, it's the least of
Yeah.
what is happening today, so not to worry. And to our audience, thank you very much for joining us. There were some great comments and great questions tonight. I do have Andrew's email in the chat box, so please make a note of it if you want to be sent the bibliography, or if you have other questions that you may like to ask him. Again, remember that this event has been recorded, and it will be available on our YouTube channels within 24 hours. So have a great rest of the evening, everybody. Thank you so much, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm sorry things were not
It was
perfect.
it was
It got better.
it went well. I think we're still on.